Okay, it's been a long day. They've started their own panel discussion. It's been a long day. We want to make sure we keep to the time. We have 30 minutes. Thanks for coming to this session. We want to use this session to share more about the space industry in Singapore. And we have here with us on stage different people representing different aspects of the satellite and space industry in Singapore. On my right, we will have someone from the government, from a local company, and from their local academia. So on my right is Kong Wee. He is the Assistant Managing Director of the Singapore Economic Development Board. It is a government agency in Singapore responsible for enhancing Singapore's position as a global center for business, innovation, technology, and talent. Kong Wee's portfolio includes the development of the Office for Space Technology and Industry, which looks after the space sector in Singapore. Harris, in the middle, he formerly headed the Future Systems and Technology Division in the Singapore's Ministry of Defence. He was also formerly a Rear Admiral in the Singapore Navy. Now he is the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Digital Officer at ST Engineering, which is a Singapore MNC with an annual turnover of almost USD 5 billion, with presence over 100 countries, including North America. It is one of Asia's largest engineering and defense company. And on my far right is Amal. He received his PhD from the University of Colorado in Aerospace Engineering Sciences. And his research interests are in Earth remote sensing and space weather monitoring on small satellite platforms. He now works in Singapore in Nanyang Technological University in the Satellite Research Center. So I'm just going to jump straight into the questions. And if you guys have any questions, we can keep it very easy, very casual. Everyone's tired at the end of the day. You know, just let us know if you have questions that you want to ask. But to kick off, I'll start off by asking Kong Wee, if he could tell us about the business environment in Singapore. And for any company, large and small, that might want to venture to Singapore, what advice would you give them?
I could talk for a whole hour. Just trying to answer your question, but I'm not going to do that. Recently, I think there's been a piece of news. It was quite widely broadcasted around the world, which is that we made it to the top rank in World Economic Forum's ranking of competitive countries. So I think that's pretty good news for us, and it's a great testimony of the kind of business environment that Singapore offers. Right? Other than WEF, World Bank also ranked us quite well in terms of ease of doing business. So in short, I think we're a really business-friendly environment here in Singapore. But I just wanted to say also that it's not just Singapore being an easy place to do business in, but it's really because the region is full of opportunities. And the region, I think you've heard us talk about it many times. The region is really Southeast Asia, 600 million people. Tends to be overlooked when you look at the world map and you see a world of giants, China, India, and so on. And it tends to be overlooked because it consists of so many countries. But really, it's a market of 600 million people. Growth has been really quite steady. It's been growing at more than 5% annually. Next 10, 20 years, experts are saying that you continue to see great growth in Southeast Asia. So we're really very positive about the future for Southeast Asia, and we think that this is really why companies should come into the region, use Singapore as a springboard to access the market in Southeast Asia. In Singapore, you see a lot of companies doing that, which is why you see, out of the global Fortune 500 companies, about 40% of them have their regional headquarters in Singapore, and it's really because Singapore is that great place where they can access the market. Maybe one last point is, if you cannot remember anything that I just spoke about, just Google EDB, www.edb.gov.sg. It said that it just takes like 1 day to register a company in Singapore. So that's how easy it is. Thank you.
And maybe if I could jump in a little bit, because there's an international audience here. We are bidding to host the IAC 2022, right? And there are four bidders. And each of them has a candidate city. And they ask, which city is Singapore going to host the IEC in? So we're a city-state. It takes 45 minutes left to go from the east coast to the west coast of Singapore. And being small has enabled us to be super efficient in our business operations and functions. When you want to have meetings, you want to register a company, you want to go to the tax office, it's very easily done. So we have turned our lack of land resources into a very strong benefit, which companies working in Singapore have found to be very beneficial. Now I'm going to go on to Harris, who has works in a company in Singapore, and maybe he can go more into the space sector. So Harris, what is ST, one of Asia's largest engineering company, doing in the space sector? How big is it, and what are the growth drivers for ST Engineering from space?
Well, thank you very much, Lynette. Well, for us in ST Engineering, in terms of doing business in the space sector, we are doing more, and we will be doing more. Right now, we are a global market share leader in satellite communication businesses, largely through our subsidiary company, iDirect, that's actually based in Singapore, as well as another company, a new tech, that's actually based in Belgium. We do a lot of OEM work, engineering solutions for satellite communications, both at the hub stations as well as delivering communication solutions as well. And going forward, because we want to push innovation to its edges, we are now already thinking about how to actually integrate satellite communication with 5G, right? So that users of 5G network can actually be seamless in terms of transiting in an area that is covered by 5G through an area that is not covered by 5G, for which we will then be covered by satellite communication and then back to a 5G area. The other area that ST Engineering is involved in is the development and launch of space satellite. I'm happy to let everyone here know that we have successfully deployed our very first Singapore-made commercial Earth observation electro-optic satellite into space in 2015, and it is launched in the near equatorial orbit. And one of the advantages of launching it into a near equatorial orbit and flying in the opposite direction as the way the Earth turns is that we can then have very high revisit rates on any part, any place along the equatorial belt. So the revisit rate is in the matter of a couple of hours as compared to revisit rates of 2 to 3 days if the satellite is launched on a sun-synchronous orbit. We are also in the progress of developing our second satellite, but still our very first synthetic aperture radar satellite to be launched by year 2022. And hopefully, if it's being successfully launched, it will also be a good milestone for us to actually commemorate and celebrate the hosting of IAC of 2022, hopefully also in Singapore.
Thanks for the plug. So Prof. Amal Chandran, he's lived and worked both in the US, in Colorado Springs, and also in Singapore. So I thought I could have him share with some of the students, young professionals here, on how exciting is Singapore a place for space research. Do you think the young people in Singapore or who come to Singapore would have a good infrastructure and good support to pursue their dreams?
Thank you, Lynette. I think it's a very vibrant country, and it's reflected in its universities. So if you look at Singapore, it's got 2 of Asia's top universities. So when I first visited Singapore to visit a colleague of mine who was working at the Satellite Research Center, and I was blown away by the facilities that they have. The Satellite Research Center at NTU has launched, 8 satellites in 8 years, starting from 2011. So there's a very fast turnaround of satellites. And as anyone in the space business knows, that's really difficult. And what's most impressive is that all 8 of them have worked. The other thing is the first Singapore satellite, XSat, was built at SARC. So it's got the fundamentals right, where you have the expertise and the capacity being developed actually in the universities and then being translated to the industry, which is what happened because we transitioned our team to ST, to ST Satcom. So the needs of the country are being met with the capacity building and education that we provide. And in the panel that was right here before, we were talking about capacity building and leaving no one behind. And I think they can take a look at Singapore, at how the university, even though, if you look at space capacity, Singapore is not at the level of, say, India or China or Japan in East Asia, but we have an excellent university system that is able to train young students and build and train them in these very niche technologies. So I take in third year and fourth year undergraduate students, and they get an opportunity to work with actual flight hardware in their third and fourth years, which is very unique. And I see a lot of excitement in the students. So as ST ramps up, its capacities, and as EDB starts to fund more space projects, I think we will be in the right position to provide them with the young talent that is required.
Thank you.
Is it okay I add on a little bit? Yeah. So as Lynette introduced, part of my role is really to develop the Office for Space Technology and Industry in Singapore. And over the last 6 years, we have channeled funding into building capabilities amongst our schools as well as our companies. So we think this is important because Singapore is a really young nation. Our efforts in space technology is even newer, right? So the office was only set up about 6 years ago. So it was important that we built the basic capabilities to help us get into this industry. And that's why I think we've worked with the universities to fund some of the education, the research and development in the universities to help us build that pipeline of talent. And we're also working with companies in collaboration with them to build capabilities in the industry as well. So it's an important part of the work that Austin, the Office for Space Technology and Industry, has been doing.
So, for both of you, what area of space R&D do you foresee Singapore playing a large role in? Which part of space R&D? Yeah.
I can take that first. The tropical region, there are many different applications of space. So I'll broadly say it as one is applications focused and emerging technology area. So if you look at communication from space or IoT from space, or NUS recently launched a satellite. There was a presentation yesterday which looked at quantum key computing. So they had, photon pairs, entangled photon pairs, and they demonstrated that from space. So one is this advanced technology area, expertise that you can build. The other is actually the tropical region. As Harris mentioned, if we get into an equatorial orbit, we can see the tropical region at a very high cadence. So almost all our satellites, we have 15 ground passes, right? And the tropical region is going to experience severe precipitation and changes related to climate change. So the weather modeling that can be done from small satellites and incorporation into local weather forecasting models is something that we focus on. So these are two technology areas which are very much applications focused that Singapore can actually contribute with the existing capacity that we have.
So do both of you agree?
Yeah, I would like to just add that in ST engineering, our focus is on two specific areas. One is on sensors, and the other one is on size. So when I talk about sensors, it's very much as what Amal has mentioned, that we are developing better and more capable sensors to actually be carried as payload to be placed on the satellites. Today, we are working on numerous areas of sensors, such as hyperspectral sensors for the purpose of detecting environmental changes. So these are very important work, especially as the world is actually going more and more into sustainability. The other area is in size. I think a big barrier of entry to play in satellite is cost. And if the satellite is huge, obviously the cost is high. So as we can bring down the size of the satellite to be able to carry the same kind of payload, right? That means it will make it more and more affordable, especially for smaller players, for startups, for small and medium enterprise to be able to enter into this field. And then because it's a chicken egg thing, right? And if they're able to enter in this field and it is not monopolized, then you can see the cost of each of the satellite coming down. So a lot of research is also being carried out in ST engineering in terms of trying to bring the size, weight, and power requirement of satellite to be even smaller and smaller, getting very much into nanosat as well as CubeSats.
So just a very short answer from me, just wearing the hat of the Economic Development Board, I think whatever the company tells me is going to make money, I will support that. And from the schools, I guess, what helps us attract the talent that we need and build the capabilities that we require for the future, I think we'll be hugely supportive of that.
Well, I have you convene. You know, the space and technology sector in Singapore is experiencing a proliferation of activities. So we have a lot of space tech startups, you know, companies who want to come to this region. Do you think this trend is going to continue, and would it lead to a greater impact to the region?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but the very existence of Austin, the Office for Space Technology and Industry, and our very efforts in trying to continue to invest in capability building as well as collaboration with companies tells you that it is our intent to try to make sure that this continues to grow as a niche sector for Singapore, right? So we're going to do our very best in terms of channeling funding efforts into growing the space community, the capabilities, and in a way, our bid for IAC 2022 in collaboration with SSTA is also one of those commitments where we think bringing the event to Singapore is going to help us create a lot more awareness, a lot more excitement, and a lot more alignment within Singapore as well as Southeast Asia for space.
So one of the companies that are coming also, they are space tech startups. What advice do both of you have, Harris and Kong Wee, for space tech startups in Singapore?
Well, I would say that perhaps the key word for space startup in particular is partnership. What I mean by partnership is that because it is space startup, and unlike other kind of startup, whether is it about developing an app for transportation, for medical, and so on and so forth, a space startup requires a lot of expertise and requires a lot of funding, right? So when it comes to expertise, it is not easy to actually be able to have people to join you in a startup to then be able to know how to actually deploy the space-based sensors or the satellite successfully. So you need a lot of partnership with companies such as ST Engineering, as just an example, with the kind of knowledge so that you can then be able to go into what you want to actually develop. The other area obviously is funding, right? Because to deploy a piece of equipment into space, you require space qualified material. You need to have sophisticated equipment to do the certification and do the testing, for which it is going to be very high capex cost for the space startup. So it's very important that you actually partner with companies who have such capabilities and who have such equipment so that you can also leverage on those costs to be able to then proceed with the venture that they want to do. So partnership between startup as well as major players are very important in my mind, for a successful business for space startup.
I think one of the best advice I can give to startups coming to Singapore, especially space startups, is to get in contact with Lynette and Jonathan from SSTA. This is the Industry Association for Space Technology in Singapore, and they are great people to get to know because they know our ecosystem so well, and they can help connect the startups with all the major players. But having said that, I think the startup ecosystem has really grown quite a fair bit over the past, I think, 7-8 years. I was just doing a quick check on Startup Singapore, one of the websites where you can find this registry of startups that have registered themselves with Singapore. And there are now, so we're a very small country, 5 million people, but we have 3,300 startups. And I think about 150 venture capital companies in Singapore, right? So the ecosystem is really vibrant now in Singapore. And I'll say, don't hesitate to approach the industry associations, government bodies like ourselves. And I know there are some countries whereby, it's a bit of a taboo, or they feel a little bit uncomfortable in approaching government servants, but it's quite different in Singapore. We're quite friendly, we don't bite. We will help you connect with the right people if it is within our influence and power.
So final question, before Denitza comes on stage. Do you think Singapore is now ready to be at the crossroads for the space sector as a whole? given that there's so much developments in the region in space tech?
I think so. Singapore has, 10 satellites in orbit? And I think in about 2 years, we would have another 7 more, sorry. We would have close to 20 satellites that we would have built, and these would all range from nanosatellites to microsatellites to small satellites. So in terms of space capacity, I would definitely say that we do. In terms of universities, we have 2 universities that have excellent state-of-the-art facilities. We have a company that is building Earth remote sensing and SME, or even bigger. And we have a vibrant system of funding, and we have pretty much a roadmap for what we want to do. The other thing is the ease of doing business, the ease of starting a company in Singapore. In all of those respects, I think it merges the West and the East really well. We are close to 2 big markets in China and India. Yes, I think we are quite ready to take the next steps in terms of having higher ambitions in space, and in keeping with the tune of what we have seen in this IAC and in the recent past in terms of new space companies. I think it would fit with the profile of Singapore as such. It's a young, vibrant nation which is very ambitious, and space, if you look at the space sector, it is young and vibrant and very ambitious. So it absolutely fits the profile.
I would say that Singapore is very special. Singapore do not have any natural resources, and the only resources that Singapore has is actually the human resource, right? And I believe that with the kind of human talent that Singapore has built up, as well as Singapore government's policy to actually invite deep technology and technical talent to actually come to Singapore, is going to augur well for Singapore to actually grow the space industry. So I think human resource and talent is very, very important in order for the space industry to actually grow and be vibrant.
All I can say is we're going to work very hard to make that happen.
Great, thank you. All work and play makes Jack a dull boy. So we have had this heavy session on the space tech industry in Singapore, what are its opportunities, what we can do here. I'm going to invite Denitza on stage. She's the Deputy Director in the Singapore Tourism Board, to give you an overview of what it is like to visit Singapore, when you have your business interactions, what could you also do in a country like Singapore. Denitza, please.
Hello. Thanks a lot for staying on. It shows that you really want to learn more about the space sector in Singapore. So the next 10 minutes would not be about space, but I do hope that will be interesting. Most of you know that Singapore has a 25% chance to host the 2022 International Convention, and we do hope that on Friday we will have good news. So the next couple of minutes are just to give you an idea of what Singapore is for those who are not familiar with our city, to prepare you for 2022, or to excite you to come to the city before 2022. Okay, so actually for a few of us from the Singapore Tourism Board, spending the last couple of days learning about space and what is important for IF has been very interesting, and we heard the word diversity a lot. And this is exactly what Singapore is. So Singapore, for those of you who don't know, we are a very small city and a country in the heart of Asia. But it's not only the strategic location, it's also how well connected we are with the region that makes us connect so well with our neighbors and the long-haul markets. So what you probably don't know is that, well, Singapore is an island, but it's not the only island. So Singapore consists of 63 islands, with the main island being accessible. So from actually you only need 15 to 20 minutes to go from one end to the other. It's 40 to 50 kilometers. We have a lot of parks. We're actually known as a city in a garden, not only as the garden city, and we hope that you would experience this. Everyone who comes to Singapore leaves saying how impressed they are with all the trees and the plants and how green we are. Okay, so the good news is that if we have the privilege to host the 2022 event, we will bring you to a tropical city. So here, well, all of us need jackets. We got a bit of rain today. You might see some rain in Singapore, but it's a tropical climate. So the usual temperature is between 25, 28. It does get hotter sometimes. September, October is usually about 25, 27. So it's a very pleasant weather, and you can also go back home with a bit of suntan. Okay, so going to the diversity topic. So Singapore is naturally diverse. We do have a fantastic mix of religions, heritage. So close to 80% of the people that live in Singapore are with Chinese heritage. But the people that are the natives to the island are actually the Malays. We do have a lot of Indians, and we do have a percentage that keeps on growing, which is what we call others or mixed. And this is an extremely interesting part of Singapore. So in terms of, so you will probably wonder how do we understand each other, or obviously we should have a common language, and that's English. So, but we do have 4 languages, with English being the main business language. We also, we have Malay as an official language, Mandarin and Tamil. In terms of connectivity, it's actually very impressive figures. So just now you saw a map of where we are, but you probably don't know that within a 7-hour flight, you can reach to 4 billion people, and that's an amazing opportunity, both for companies who want to expand to this part of the world, or for association representatives to broaden their networks. We're very efficient, and what that means, so my colleague from the Economic Development Board just now mentioned that, okay, it only needs a day to set up a company in Singapore, but from where I come from, we talk about how easy it is to get from the airport to the city. So and that shows efficiency, and trust me, nothing happens by chance. So when you land to Changi Airport, those of you who have been there, you know that you only need very few minutes to go through the customs, collect your luggage, take a taxi, and get to the hotel. So probably that whole experience would take you about 15, 20 minutes, and that's very impressive. So, and it just comes to say that in Singapore, everyone has a KPI to meet, or is trying to really elevate the experience of our visitors, customers. So same goes with the customs. So they have a target of clearing the queue, or one passenger for 1 to 3 minutes, and people shouldn't queue for more than 5. So I found that statistics really impressive. So that goes for everything in town. So for the hotels, the check-in, etc. So the other very important, it's actually an accolade that we are very proud of, is the safety and security. And we know how important that is, especially nowadays. We don't take that for granted. So there's a lot of effort to see the city secured. And it really starts with the government, with the government-to-government relationships, being friendly to our neighbors, understand where they're coming from, and of course the effort in Singapore to remain safe. So even the way we clear, you would clear security at the airport it's actually quite different from every other airport. But so it is you would see security at each gate, so you would not experience a long queue. But we are, we believe we are one of the safest cities in the world with having that practice in place. I spoke about connectivity, but I'll just give you a few figures for you to get a better idea of what that means. So our Changi Airport has about 100 airlines that operate to our city. And they fly to 400 cities in the world, to 100 countries. The total number of flights every week is 7,200. So to give you to put this in perspective, the city, in Singapore we have 5.5 million citizens, and we, as I mentioned, the size of the country is 40 by 50, so to have that concentrations of flights, it's extremely of a big size for a city like us. Okay, so unfortunately not all passengers come in the city. A lot of them are transiting, but the role of our the Singapore Tourism Board is actually to put a lot of experiences in place and reasons for passengers to come out of Changi Airport and experience the city. And we hope that if we are successful in the bid, you would have that reason to come. Okay, so Changi Airport is an experience on its own, and you would actually hear a lot of Singaporeans and Singapore citizens when we travel overseas, and we, for some reasons, don't get a good experience, or the processes at the customs are not efficient. We always compare with Changi. So yeah, we think that we are very spoiled in that sense. And you would be surprised to probably hear that because a lot of people go to the airport when they have a flight to catch, but in Singapore, a lot of citizens do go to the airport for an experience. So now Changi Airport has built an additional, well, it's actually very difficult to define. I'll just call it a building that has attractions, a lot of F&B, and you can check in your luggage, and so you don't need to go to the terminal. You can check in your luggage at the Jewel, and you can experience a lot of attractions. It is an amazing, it has been really an amazing building. So once you get out of the airport, you have a few options to move around, and they're all extremely affordable. So I just wanted you to see how easy it is to get into the city. It probably takes you about 15 to 20 minutes to get to the central district, and that would cost you not more than $15 US. So $15 US would be if you decide to take a taxi or Grab, but the public transport, which is known to be of a fantastic quality, is going to cost you about $1. In terms of accommodation, there's fantastic diversity of options. So for those of you who came by our booth or are familiar with our offer for the bid for the IAC in 2022, So we included a lot of information about Marina Bay Sands. So I'm not going to spend the next minute talking about Marina Bay Sands. I'll just share with you the other options you have in town. So the current variety, the current inventory in the city is, so we have 68,000 hotel rooms, which by 2022 will get to 70,000. By 2022, we will have close to 500 hotels. And last year, we had an average rate of 160 US dollars. So this is statistics that the Singapore Tourism Board diligently tracks. I just wanted to give you an idea of how affordable we are. So it's easy to get in, it's easy to find a place to stay, and you have a lot of options. Not to mention that the question, oh, is it far, in Singapore is not applicable because everything is within 15, 20 minutes. Beyond, so now that we covered getting into the city, and I will not spend any time on the fact that you will be up for fantastic content if we win the bid for the conference, but I'm going to hopefully excite you by, actually I hope that a few of you came to our booth a couple of hours ago where we had a Singapore reception. You could smell the fantastic food from the entrance of the hall, and so this is what you're up to if you come to Singapore. It is very difficult to define the Singapore food because we have a variety of options, and but the one that we are mostly proud of is the chili crab. So you're up for a treat. In Singapore, a couple of years ago, we started, so we saw the Michelin guide for the first time. It has created a tremendous excitement. So food has always been very important to Singapore and Singaporeans and to the visitors, but it really brought the additional flavor. What is extremely interesting is, and from what we understand, it has not been seen in a lot of places around the world. So in Singapore now, you can go to a hawker center and have a meal for $2. That's Singapore dollars, so it's about 150 USD. And that comes to say that no matter where you get your food in Singapore, the quality is amazing. Okay, so this is Marina Bay Sands, and we hope that after the convention is over, you can do exactly this. Get on a bike or go for a run. There's plenty of things to do in the city, and we can't wait to show you those. So we do hope to see you in 2022, and thanks a lot for staying on for the session. Hopefully you learned something that you didn't know about Singapore beyond space. So I'm just going to end with a short video about Singapore and what we believe our identity is, and what Harry said, it's really about people and people's passion.
There's no
Place like this.
This is the place.
This is the place I call home.
Our home.
This is where 1212 and 112 are not just dancing steps. Where our back streets live on as galleries and museums. This is where we live amongst trees. Carve them out of metal and make them electric. Where impossibilities lead us to endless possibilities. This is where old school, new school, and what no school can teach come together. Here, every day is a new canvas. The old school cool. This is where rhymes, chimes, and the daily grime meet.
There's no place.
This is where who you were will not be who you will become. This is where all that you're passionate about, all that drives you, is made possible. This is where passion is made possible.
This is your stage!
Thank you very much. We are running out of time, and I know some of you have questions. So we're going to move to the back of the hall, the panelists and I. And if you have questions, we could take it over there because we're overrunning in time. Thank you.